Welcome to A Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach with Mark Gellard and Candy Reid, sponsored by the ERT 300. Well, a warm welcome back to the podcast, and it is a very exciting moment for me. We've also got Mark Gellard in the studio. Thanks, Mark, for jumping in. I know you've had a busy time currently preparing for Rome. We've had Mark, strength and conditioning experts, we've had psychologists, we've had tennis coaches, we've had players. What we haven't had is a neuroscientist, and that changes today because thanks to Mark, we've been in touch with Dr. Niklas. He is on the call with us, I believe from Germany. You can tell us otherwise, but a very warm welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for jumping in.
Yeah, hi to both of you. Very nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I'm going to start because Liverpool are my football club, Dr. Niklas, and they have just won the Premier League title. And I know you have done a lot of work with the Reds. They're a lifelong team of mine. I've actually interviewed Kenny Dalglish. I've been up to Anfield on multiple occasions. So the fact that you have helped them in a huge way is very exciting to me. And I'd love to know how that relationship got going and how and what your experiences have been at Liverpool.
Well, to be fair, first of all, I'm not there anymore for a year now, for a season. But I did text with a bunch of the players today. So that was really, really cool, because obviously, when you work with those athletes for over 3 years, you build relationships, and it's not just about the athletic part, like the success, obviously performing under pressure where, we come in to help. But yeah, it's just, about in the end being human beings and just being happy for each other. And I'm very, very happy for a bunch of the guys, especially the ones that weren't able to win it yet. So that came with us because we came a year after they won the Premier League. And of course, we're very happy to help them over that time to also 4 trophies, 2 of them on penalty shootouts. So yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's a great club. It's a brilliant environment to work in. A lot of growth mindset. A lot of openness to new technology, and realizing, okay, we have to get an edge over our competitors, whatever that percentage might be. So I think that's where Jürgen Klopp back then, realized, okay, this could be kind of the next step. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Niklas, I thanks again for joining us, and I know that you've already helped Magda and I mean, we can talk about that a little bit more. Can you just give us a brief, for people listening that don't know about what you do, can you give us a brief synopsis of what you do and how it is applicable to tennis players or coaches that are listening?
Yeah, so I think I have to just explain a little bit my background in this context. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I have a PhD in psychology and neuroscience from the University of Bonn. And what happened was that at the end of my PhD, me together with a bunch of, on the one hand, old friends, who studied business and who came from elite sports, we sat down together and we said, okay, look, are there any neuroscientific techniques that you can use to help players focus better on the court or on the soccer pitch, on the football pitch? And in the end, it came down to one technology called EEG. I think a lot of people who've had probably, for example, a concussion, or who might have unfortunately have had to deal with epilepsy in the youth or something like this, if they've had it before. And what it literally does is it measures brain waves. So it measures how high the frequency is, so how many times per second basically the brain fires. And this is just something, everybody can look this up on Wikipedia or Google or whatever. There are different, what we call brain states, or different frequency ranges. You might have heard of them, something like alpha, beta, theta, things like that. But in the end, the way we, when we looked into the literature, we basically saw, okay, there's something of a sweet spot. And, a lot of people, if I give some simple examples, the best free kick looks very simple from Lionel Messi, for example, or when Steph Curry throws a ball, it looks easy. And that, I think that's what's so amazing about sports from a, brain point of view. There's something about it where the best things, they come in easy. They look simple. They're not forced, and on the other hand, the athlete, it's also not like, sleepy or anything like that. So what we do is we use an EEG. We use a method called EEG neurofeedback to help the athletes get into a specific frequency range, and that frequency range is well known to be associated with accuracy, and with being in the zone or being in flow. And here I think is where also the psychology background comes into play, where you have to be extremely good at assessing the athlete as an individual human being, because every human being has different topics. So I was thinking about that actually just before this podcast. My sister and me, we grew up a very similar way, but very different people. And you can be with your best friend or even twins. There are differences in the thought structure and how they deal, especially with pressure situations. So yeah, I hope Mark, I was able to help a little bit with Magda, and I'm very happy, obviously, this season that she's doing very well. So yeah, I think it's, every player or every athlete has a different way to deal with this information. But in the end, I think this information, how to get into the zone more frequently, I think that's very valuable for every one of us.
Mark and Dr. Niklas, how did you meet each other, and what specifically have you done for Magda?
So I was in Boca Raton working with Marie Puskova. That's the one who I started with, who I've been working with for the longest time. And then through the old coach, we got in touch, and I think we sat down for coffee and close to Miami. And I just explained it to Mark because I know he has also some football or soccer interest and background and stuff. And yeah, we just got talking, and I think then he realized, okay, this could be something worth at least trying out and seeing how it is. And then eventually, we met up and we did some training on different topics. I don't know, Mark, if you want to talk about it, but there's several different things, and Magda is a bit different than other players, but in the end, it comes down to basically also talking. And that's why it was so cool to work with Mark, because the more open the coach is, and the more I'm able to to talk about just aspects of the game that there's some potential also mentally to work on, the more I can help.
I think Mike, Nick, we met through Mike Urbania, who was
Mike,
coaching,
right, that's right.
Was coaching Marie Puskova, and he is a big Liverpool fan, and he had
good taste.
Read, I believe it was Jurgen Klopp's book that he was reading, and that's where
Pep Linders, the assistant coach.
Okay, and he'd mentioned Neuro 11 and you and what you guys had done for the football team, and so he got in touch with you, I believe, back, this is maybe a year ago, or maybe longer, and then he talked to me about it and mentioned the idea, and then we were able to meet up in Boca when Niklas was working with Marie, and I liked the sound of it, and we were able to set up a training day. I think it was in December this past year, so just a couple months ago. So it was a real interesting experience for everyone, and definitely very valuable. Magda really enjoyed it, and I think it's something that she'll want to do again for sure. She's already expressed that intent. So I think it's really valuable, and it's an untapped area in tennis. I mean, everyone's trying to find always that extra 1% advantage, and I think it's something that she felt was really interesting, and probably even 5 or 10 years from now, we'll be sitting here and seeing how much you have changed your approaches or improved your methodologies, right? As we all will. So I think this is just the beginning for tennis, really.
Yeah, I think that's. I think first of all, thanks again, Mike. If you look at this, obviously, because he did play a big role in this, and I'm definitely very thankful for this. I totally agree. I was last week in Vienna working with my first men's player, doubles player, and it's just so fascinating to see the different sport. I did also shot putting, I think it's called in English.
Yeah, shot put.
Last week, like a huge talent, German talent. This guy is like 1 meter 90 kilograms at the age of 16. Unbelievable.
Wow.
But especially also at that age, younger ages, to realize how to deal with those, or to be prepared to deal with the mental pressure in those situations, not to go in to the situation and just, be overwhelmed. I think that's so crucial. And, so far the way I see it is, we've had a lot of psychology, and I've studied psychology and I really enjoyed it, but it's a lot of talking. And what I really like about neuroscience is that it's just more data-based. It gives us more information, and I really believe that this is just the next step, to be a bit more factual about what we do.
All right. So, Niklas, when you meet a new player, whether they be a tennis, football, basketball, golfer, what's your first step? Just talk us through the process, please.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously depends on the sport, but the first thing would be, first of all, just to get to know that person. So we've developed a questionnaire. It's based off stuff that I've done during my PhD. So during my PhD, I was focused on risk-taking, so understanding how the brain works during risk-taking, how it responds to rewards and to losses. And based off that, we've just developed our own questions. I'll give you one example. For tennis, do you think it's worse if your serve goes out, or if your opponent gets an immediate chance for a perfect return, like if it's just the easy way to return it? And most of the people out there, they will say it's worse to miss the serve, but then you have the odd one who says the opposite, and then it just gets you discussing and gets you talking about why is your mindset like that, why do you approach it like this. And that's part of the work. I mean, ideally I'd like to go, to be honest, just for dinner and just sit down and get to know each other a little bit, understand the person, and then I think most of the important work gets done on the court, where first of all you do a baseline measurement, so you have some basic measures to compare to, and then for example, you start serving, you do first serve, second serves, from different angles, different targets, try to identify where possibly, for example, you have more focus, where do you have less focus, what are some thoughts that creep in sometimes, maybe also recently there were like a few stories, maybe some double faults, or Mark, you probably know a lot more insights here, and then in football, for example, it's the same with penalties. If you have a player who, let's say he missed a penalty when he was 16, and then you start training penalties, and he has that one corner he doesn't like to target, there's probably a good psychological reason for why he doesn't like to go there. So it's about just understanding those, let's say, we call them mental hurdles or pitfalls or things, because I really believe that for me, a huge role of my coaching, a huge part is empathy. I really want to understand the player, because the more I can put my mind into his or her mind, the more I can, I can try to help. And what I really want to kind of prevent happening is give some advice, to a person that I don't even know, and it could be the complete wrong advice, just because I don't literally know what's going on in his or her head. So that's why I think the first step is getting to know his or her mindset, getting into the very details of it, and then speaking to the coach, speaking to the player, not forcing anything upon the player. I think that's also important. We're not trying to make machines out of the players, but we try to give the right advice or answer the questions, and just get a good conversation going, and then deal with the questions in the right way.
To be clear, when you say you were taking baseline measurements, you're talking about, you're measuring brainwave activity here, right? You're not talking about, that's kind of the nub or the nebulous of what you're working, right? You're measuring brainwaves, you're checking how players are thinking. So, as a coach, we try to identify whether it's body language or technical things, mechanical markers or reference points, but you're actually looking inside the brain and trying to figure out what's going on from the inside out rather than from the outside in.
Yeah, I think, in the end, you can ask, good example is you can ask, let's say 18-year-old or 16-year-old player, and you can be like, are you focused right now? And he will always usually say, yeah, I'm very focused. But what we know is, or what we can see through our technology basically is just, are you actually in that state of mind, or are you just, pretending to be there? And I think that's a big difference, I think in the end, it's just gets the conversation very transparent, and he or she knows, okay, you can't cover anything up. And that just gets, in the end, to be a great conversation, and to, just to deal with also, those little things that creep into your head. So,
Dr. Niklas, you're looking at someone's brain waves. I actually saw a video with you working with a golfer on your website, and it was interesting because you had cones around the putting green, and I don't know quite how they worked out, but you're monitoring her brain waves and then putting pressure on her. You were distracting her to see what would happen next. So just talk us through that and how you come to a conclusion, how you can help people.
Yeah, the cones were just, to get a feel for the distance, because sometimes on a putting green, it's, at first sight, it's kind of difficult to assess the distances. So we just did that also for the video. I think that, ideally, I'd like to, the gold standard, for example, at Liverpool is to work with somebody on a monthly basis, because you need to kind of assess your mindset, you need to train it, and then you need to go back into the competition. Then you need to assess yourself again, you need to understand, okay, I realized these 1 or 2 or 3 things under pressure. I talked about them with my coach, and then, you specifically on the court work on those little things again. So it's a little bit, I see it like a Formula 1 car, and you have to fine tune it every time. And the distraction part only comes into play usually at a certain point when you realize, okay, this person's mentally pretty stable. So I can, try to see what happens if I give just a little input, something that he or she doesn't expect, and see how the brain deals with that. Do we completely lose focus? Does not play a role at all? And just to give even that feedback to the athlete or to the coach, and to say, okay, look, I think there's 1 or 2 things we can work on here, or to say, look, he or she is working really well, or dealing really well with distractions. In either way, it's a good knowledge, I think, to have. And I think as an athlete, to be clear about those things, that's the first step. And if you're not honest to yourself about it, you're never gonna improve. So I think that's what we're here for, is to have just that clear conversation. Yeah. But that's one part of it. Sorry, Candy. It's there's many different things to it. Distraction is one part. Variation maybe also of the you don't want to vary too much of the serve, but just trying different approaches in golf, for example. And Rose Zhang, I think that's the video you're referring to.
Yes.
She's saying she tried 2 practice putts, and then she goes back to 1 practice putt. So she's trying out different things, and she's very unclear right now. What is the thing that she actually wants? And
yes.
I think that's where we can also help. If there's a little doubt or something about your routine or your procedure, then we can help you to assess quicker which one is the more optimal one.
Okay.
For people listening that are either college players, juniors, club players, aspiring professionals, how accessible and realistic is it that they have this opportunity to do something like this with you? Is this something that's really only reserved for elite players, high performance, or is this something accessible? Because for me, if I was a coach listening before you and I sat down to talk about it, it's one of those things that sometimes sounds great, but it's only for the very elite few. So for a regular club player or a college player or someone that's just starting out on their pro journey, how can they use this kind of training for themselves, and how can you do this in 1 session? I know you said monthly is great, but how does that, how accessible is this to players that are looking to use this that maybe aren't already at the top of the game?
Yeah, so when I say monthly, I'm talking about the top level, in the world's biggest sport. No offense to tennis, but it's the world's biggest sport, football, in the end, and with one of the world's biggest clubs. So that's just the top. When you talk about tennis, I think with an elite player, I think 4 times per year, something like this is realistic because of all the traveling, you do, and of course the goal is also to be there on tour, and to for example have multiple players to be accessible in that way. But now talking about the college players, for example, or the aspiring young ones. We work a lot with those players, actually. Like Patrick Henschke, my co-founder right now, he's right now in Bangkok, and he's training with exactly, that kind of level. Not the very, very top, for example, in golf, but, lead players who are also very, very good, let's say comparable a little bit to college tennis players, you know. And funny enough, you asked that question, Mark, because even just today, you know, we were discussing in our team, there's a meta-analysis that came out about the training approach that we do. So for those who are not in research, meta-analysis it's like the highest level of research you can have. It basically looks at, you know, numerous studies on a specific topic, and then looks, okay, overall, is there a significant training effect? Yes or no? That's the kind of question. And what they did is they also looked at the different training levels in that, you know, and they found that it's not only for the experts, it's actually also for the ones that are, you know, aspiring to be experts. So I can clearly say, yes, it's realistic, but it's maybe more of a thing where, let's say, when you're, you know, 16 to 20 or something like this, you have that one session, and then you get to talk about it, and you can take that knowledge into whatever you're, you know, going to do. And if you ever come around to, you know, to wanting to do a second session or whatever, and it, you know, if there's a chance, then I think it's, you know, that's the next step. But overall, I mean, you know, Mark, you know how was the session, you know, just imagine I'm there at a college, you know, for a whole day, and you have like 3 or 4 players, they get this kind of information, and the coaches. I think it's really, really valuable, you know, to get it. So yeah, that's the way I see it right now. And we're not, I mean, we love working in elite sports, but we learn from every athlete and every player, honestly. It's incredible.
Do you get, Niklas, great reactions? So you meet someone for the first time, you've had dinner, you understand them a little bit better, and then you work with them on the court, on the course, on the football pitch. Is it kind of a realization of what they've almost been missing and what they can achieve after one session with you?
Well, I don't want to sound like a magician, you know, like it's just not like, you know, we don't come in and change your whole life, you know. No, that's not how it is.
If they want a magician, they need to call me.
Yeah, then they got to talk to Mark.
You're much cheaper.
I just, you know, honestly, like, I think we've just found a way to make neuroscience like easily understandable. I think that's the best part of what we do. And then they start reflecting on their own like behavior, on their own, you know, approach to the matches, maybe, you know, also the stuff before that, you know, and maybe, for example, valuing sleep more, because then you understand, okay, this is actually what sleep does, you know. So it's like little conversations like that.
Yes.
I mean, I've had the feedback from players, crazy enough. They've told me before that when they have a penalty, for example, that I'm in their head, and I'm telling them basically, okay, look, you know, don't do this right now, because like that's a big pitfall. Don't go for that right now. Just relax, you know, stay confident, you know, keep your trust. So, I mean, I know that the training that we do does transfer into the competition. I think that's just the general feedback I've had from a lot of players in big moments. And I think that's great, you know, because I hope that I don't tell them any bullshit. But you know what I mean? I think it just depends, you know. There's some players, and I think that's just human, you know. Maybe some players will take up that information very quickly, soak it up like a sponge, and use it right away in competition. Some will need a few more sessions, but that's normal. Not every person, and you know that, Mark. Maybe that question goes over to you. You know, some athletes take a bit longer to, you know, to build the trust and to go for it, you know, and to take the risk, because in the beginning it feels like risk to do that. So
yeah, I would like to also mention that, because Niklas was actually, we had a First Strike webinar recently and got a lot of interest, and he was one of the keynote speakers for us on that conference, and we had some really good feedback on what you discussed. And Candy, if there's a way, maybe we can put up the link. Oh, you've already done it. You're already ahead of me. We've already got that link up there. So for people that are interested, they can learn more about, because in the presentation he talked specifically about how he starts to measure brain waves, how he gets the baseline measurements, and then the procedures and processes for actually making the measurement, and then you know, finding ways to improve. Magda said to me today, we were on court, and this is a genuine anecdote for what we did, is we were working on returns, and she said, you need to give me more time, Mark, between my returns, because you're serving too fast. I'm not giving me the frequency of my serves was too quick.
Right.
Never the speed. I never had
That's
that.
never happened.
Yeah, no, the frequency was too quick, not the speed. Let me be clear on that. I've never had anyone accuse me of serving too fast. But because for her to get herself into the right mental mindset and the place that she felt was the best for her, was what she worked on with Niklas when he came to Florida with us.
Okay.
And in order for her to get into that space mentally, she needed more time between returns when we were working on it today. And she told me, you've got to slow down between, because it's not giving me enough of a time, enough window for her to prepare herself. And she feels it really helped her, with her return of serves, and certainly with the serve as well.
I think honestly, like, that's so brilliant, because it's not like, just having that discussion, but like having it just like openly, and the athlete saying that. Like, think about that. Imagine you're like an athlete who's not aware of that. And then, you have that session, and it's like an important session in Rome, and you want to, prepare for a huge tournament. And then, the session is not like, I don't want to say wasted, but it's just not as efficient, So I think it's like little things. And sometimes people ask me, okay, where is it exactly you help? But I think it's exactly those kind of things. But you also need a coach, who's able to not take the criticism and be like, that's like something against me. No. It's like just to make it, better overall. And yeah, I'm happy to hear that.
Well, I think one of the things is that sorry, Candy, I just want to mention on there that with tennis, the one thing that I've always had a tough time as a coach trying to figure out, why on Monday do we come out and serve the best we've ever served, and on Tuesday we come out and we serve one of the worst matches we've ever served? Because mechanically, technically, all these things don't change. There is something mentally, right? There's something happening where in her mind, or in the player's mind, you're not in the same place. Maybe you didn't sleep as well, but the serve is something that doesn't have a lot of variables, right? The court surface doesn't matter. The opponent that you're playing shouldn't have too much influence on you. But why is there such a variable range from day to day with serves? And I think that this is something that, as coaches, we do our best to try to reduce the variables, identify patterns, and try to find things that we can use to help players. And I can see, geez, we're not serving well today. I can tell that right away, that whether it's a small technical thing or just the way body language, but trying to find something objectively measurable that she can then use in matches or in practice, I think is really important. And I think it's something that tennis coaching and coaching in general, we haven't even tapped, we haven't even started to really pay attention to that. And what you're doing for me is really interesting. But I think, and I've said this before on this podcast with Candy, that I think in 50 years, we're going to look back and laugh at a lot of things we're doing today, because I think we get a lot of things wrong. But that's just my observation.
Yeah, I think the brutal thing in tennis is, you just have so many repetitions of one movement that it's very, like, let's say, very mentally hard, like it's like punishing, because it's not, I don't want to get too nerdy, but we all know the normal distribution curve, right? So like you will have, in mathematics, right, you have a normal distribution. So saying that on the one end, you're like, let's say top level, very, very good, but it doesn't happen like that often. And on the other end, because it goes like this, it's like you have very, very bad days, but also doesn't happen very often. So normally you just have a good average. So all you have to do is like push that average, make it better, make it more consistent. And I think the huge difficulty in tennis is, if you have so many serves, and you have like, let's say 5 bad ones in a row, you think, okay, today it's off, and your mindset start going towards that. But if you look mathematically at the distribution, you're just like, okay, it's just 5 out of the very bad ones. So there's a very good chance that I'll just, come back to the mean. This in statistics is very well known, and in psychology, but try explaining that to a player in that moment when you have that pressure on, it's like, no, so it's about, just getting the consistency, getting the routine right. And that's a big question that I've had many times. Players ask me is like, if I have a very, very bad day, can I still have a perfect free kick? Can I still have a perfect serve? And I'm telling you, yes, you can. You absolutely can, from a brain point of view, from a neuroscience point of view. I know that there are many dynamics and there are many things in that. And Mark, you probably know like a lot more than I do. But just from a neuroscience point of view, you definitely can. So when you get to that final moment, you can perform. And I think that's the belief in that and the knowledge about that, what the brain is capable in those moments. That's kind of what drives me too, because I want to give that to the players. I want them to understand and to be there. So when 80% of your serves are worse on that day, it's like, okay, but when there's a tiebreak, boom, that's the moment when I turn on, and all of a sudden it's good, and that's how I win the match. That's my goal basically for that.
That's fascinating, Niklas. So would you say then, if you look at someone like a Novak Djokovic in his heyday, Roger Federer, Serena Williams, and then you look at someone who perhaps is outside the top 50, outside the top 100, how would their brain state differ in the big moments?
Ooh, that's a big one, Candy. Yeah, that's... if you publish that, you probably get a Nobel Prize or something. It's...
I'm a long way away from that.
I think, like being a successful athlete is like, and being at the very top, and there's so many variables to it, so many factors that play a role, right? In those moments, like everything basically has to be like on point, but I do believe, and I think, it's cool that they're getting like more outspoken now, I think the best in the past, if you look back, like the last decades, usually the best players, they don't talk much. Like, I don't know, in football, Zinedine Zidane, he didn't talk much. Franz Beckenbauer had why they're good, they didn't even reflect themselves really that much. But now, you see more and more interviews, and Djokovic was also talking about a few things, his mental training and all these kind of things. Mo Salah, he opened up about his routines and how difficult it is to be mentally, focused, and that the mental training is harder than the work in the gym. That's a big interview he gave. So we know more and more that, the athletic part is, of course, part of the whole thing. It's a huge part. It's probably the main part. The technical part is important, but yeah, and in those moments, those players, they're prepared. I think there's a great YouTube video I can recommend for everybody from Michael Phelps, where he talks about, you've probably seen it, you're nodding. It's where he talks about every basically race that he's done. He's already like swam 100 times on the day before, basically, because, he imagines the goggles going off. He imagines all these different situations happening. And if you look into the literature, neuroscientific literature on visualization, it's just amazing. You can mentally prepare for those difficult moments very well. But then again, the next step is in that moment when it happens to, have the mindset, the guts, the courage, all these things to be still on point and to perform well. And it's, I always feel like for me as a coach, it's easy to talk about, but in the end, I'm so proud of those athletes that do it in those moments. It's a huge step. It's like, it's massive. Yeah.
I'll go off. Just bear with me here for 20 seconds because I might go off and digress on a tangent. I don't know if you've seen the new Netflix with Carlos Alcaraz. It's just come out this week, and it was quite a big thing here in Madrid because it was sponsoring the event. I've already watched that. I watched the Breakpoint Netflix documentary they did some time ago. For me, one of the things that's been really disappointing with all of those shows, including the recent Alcaraz one, was the lack of insights that you get into the way these players think. And the reason I believe in that, one is the producing of the show and the way it's run, but I do believe that these top players, they know what to do, but they don't know how they know what to do. And that's a real issue because you're hoping that when you watch these things, you hear something you haven't heard before, or you get something fantastic that you can take into your training. And there is very seldom something where you go, oh, wow. And so I find that's the problem with these documentaries I've watched recently, is that they're not giving you that little bit of excitement that you thought they might give you by getting something unique. And I listened, last week in Madrid. I won't mention the coaches' names or the players that they're coaching, but I talked to a couple of them, the coaches, and they're both working with very high-level players. And the coach was often saying to me, it was a very similar message. No, my player played shit today. She won 6-4 in the third. She just played so well. When she knew it was an important moment, she played well. When she knew how much value that point had, she stepped up and played a great point. And so these top players are able to say, I've played bad all day today, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. If I play this point well, the 3 times I've been broken this set and the 25 unforced errors are erased if I win this point. So I just need to step up, get myself in the correct mindset, whatever that is, and execute well right now. And I think that's something that is a real art. And how many times you watch Serena and Novak and Roger and Rafa where they tiebreak is 5-4 down in the tiebreak, and you still say, if I'm betting $1,000, I'm still going to put my money they're going to win it. If it goes to 5-all in the third, you're still going to put your money that they're going to win it, even if they haven't played well. And so one of the things that I think, and this is something with Magda that I've worked on a lot, I say worked on, that we focused on a lot, having Agnieszka help us out as well, is trying to understand that, and this is a very basic observation, but every point is worth one. You're always going to have good days, bad days, good moments and bad moments, but it's understanding how to recognize momentum in matches, when is important to sort of say, okay, this moment right here, because we had a point last week where, let me go back to Miami, where we had some horrible, points there. We played some bad mistakes. But if we are able to then win the next 2 or 3 points and win that game, that bad or stupid mistake we made at the start of the game, it becomes forgotten. It's forgotten. It's no longer relevant to the match and no one's talking about it. But if you lose that game after having made a poor mistake earlier in it and it costs you the match, well, that becomes the focal point. The long way I've got to the point here is that I think that a lot of the players are so unaware of what it is they're doing. And that's where I think, as I've said, these documentaries you watch, they don't provide the insights that we really would like to have. If anyone's listening, the thing that for me provided the best insight, if you watch, there's a YouTube video with Roger practicing in Dubai. And I believe he's practicing with the French player whose name's just gone out of my head here. I'll remember it in a minute.
I know who it was. Keep going and I'll come back to you.
And he's a top player. He's one of my favorite players to watch a couple of years ago, and I can't believe he's just gone out of my mind. Lucas something maybe.
Luca Pui. It was Luca Pui.
And they play a practice set, and it's clear that they're not playing 1,000% in that match, in that practice set. But Roger's wearing a microphone, a small mic on his shirt the whole time. That to me is far more insightful than anything I saw in the Alcaraz documentary or the Breakpoint documentary, because he gives you little glimpses into what's going through his head after he misses a forehand down the line, what he's telling himself. So for example, sometimes I'll ask Magda, you went down the line, you missed it wide. What should you have done? And she'll say, should have hit cross court. Why the fuck would you change your decision down the line to go cross court if you missed it by 2 inches? Move your target in 3 inches and it's a great shot. Why go from one extreme to another? Why? And so these little things are the difference between the good and the great. And I think if for people listening to this, check out that video. We'll put the link up if we can, Candy, afterwards, because that gives you a really good insight into what's going through a player's mind in real time, which is something I think is really missing in tennis as we've seen so far.
And just to add on that, I think what's absolutely, I think the number one mistake that you can do is try to judge people too much on the outside, so when they, let's say, I know that's the fascination of watching sports, and watching those pressure situations. Like, we love watching a penalty shootout, for example, but then sometimes people ask me, okay, what did the player think or do in that moment? And then, a big learning that I've really come, a big thing that I've come to learn is I'm not going to make the judgment to have talked to that player, because it's unbelievable sometimes what goes on in their heads, and it's so important not to have like a, let's say, like a bias before that. I first want to talk to them, like you said, like you just did, Mark. I asked Magda, why did you do that? And the reasoning could be completely different than what you're assuming, she might say, and if I want to be a good coach, I want to know the truth. I don't want to know my truth. I want to know what he or she is thinking. So yeah, it's good insight. And I think a lot of the players, they're afraid to to share that information. Maybe they might feel that they sound stupid or something like this. But at least I think in the modern day, it's become more open. I think if you look back 30, 40 years, there's no discussion, or there's barely anything on that.
And if a player often, I think, especially with the female players, but in general, all players, as a coach, if they make a mistake or if they do something well, I'll say, okay, what did you do well, or what did you do poorly? And they'll give you an answer. But that question should usually then be followed with, okay, how did you feel? Because it's one thing to know, okay, this is what they did wrong. Okay, you missed that ball down the line wide. Okay, so why do you think, Magda, you missed that ball down the line wide? Okay, I was late, I wasn't in position, whatever the reason was. Okay, but the next question should always be followed with, well, how did you feel? Because the feeling they have is more important than the action itself. Because there's many players on the tour that we can watch that don't have excellent techniques. You look at Daniil Medvedev, and we use him a lot as an example. He's technically, mechanically not that sound, but the feeling that he has is almost unbeatable. He has the best feeling of his own strokes. He knows, he has such confidence in those swings that it doesn't matter. So it's always, there's two parts to it. Okay, what happened, and then how did you feel? And I think that as coaches, we have sometimes, for me, I don't like the feeling question because it's very subjective and it's very difficult to. It's a harder thing to change how someone feels about something, but if you can explain to them what they did wrong, that's a little bit easier. So I think as a coach, we have to address both areas: what you did wrong and then how you felt about it.
I also think the difficulty is that this is again looking at it from a brain point of view. The best kind of motion you have are like the automatic ones. You just did it and it was perfect, and you didn't prepare it too much in your head. It just felt natural, it felt perfect, and boom, you just went for it. It's a perfect shot. And when we talk about it too much, it kind of brings in that consciousness that kind of takes you away from being in an automatic state. So the magic or the big difficulty is to talk about it, assess it correctly, train it, but then go back to, again, performing it in an extremely automatic and perfect way.
And that's when you get to...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say that's how we see our training. So it's kind of like you take the Formula One car apart, and then you put it back together, fine tune it, but then you just let it run, and it needs to be there on an automatic perfect mode, and then you do a slight adjustments, but you don't go back into too much detail. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, but as coaches, I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what we can do, because when she's in a zone, we do nothing. It's the trying to figure out what we can do to help her when she's not in the zone, or she's far. How is she a long way from being in the zone?
Exactly. Yeah.
Then we have a real problem. Then we've got to make if she's in or the player's in a long way away from being in their zone, we might have to change the tournament schedule because we need more matches to get there. We might have to do X, Y, and Z. But I think it's about trying to figure out, I think it's the 4 steps, right? When you first learn something, you're unconsciously incompetent. You are not consciously aware of how bad you're doing something or how wrong it is. Eventually, you want to get that next stage would then be consciously incompetent. Okay, now I'm aware. I'm still bad at that, but I'm not good at it. I know I'm not good at it, and I can see what I'm doing wrong. Then we get to the part of, where we're now competent, but consciously. So we're now able to do that exercise or that movement, but we have to think about it. And the final step is where we're sort of unconsciously competent, if that makes sense. So you're not having to think about it, but you're competent. So the goal for me is always try to get them to that point where they're, unconsciously competent. But I think that as coaches, we're always sort of planning for the rainy day, right? The days where things aren't going well, where players aren't in the zone. Because I know from, when we were in Miami a couple of weeks ago, Magda kind of, after the first round, she kind of got going. And I just noticed that I said less and less. And it was more just being a cheerleader at that point, right? Because it's just supporting her, because she knew the decisions. Like, it was very unusual by the second, third, fourth round that she was making bad decisions. It was just maybe a bad execution, which is part of being human. You're always going to have that. But I think I think that you're right. We have to get to that point of being automated and adaptable.
Yeah, but you summarized that really well, honestly. I think
Like, get that in writing.
put that on our website.
Niklas, we had a tennis coach called Dave Samuel on a couple of weeks ago. He's South African, has coached a lot in Great Britain, works with top tennis players, top juniors. And he was talking about two Formula One interesting concepts. There was one, it was a former Formula One driver, and there was a circuit and a turn where before him there'd been an accident, and there would be no way of knowing that there'd been an accident. It was before all the radio stuff. And for some reason, this guy, the Formula One driver, managed to get round the accident with no problem at all, having not known anything about it, whereas the driver behind him crashed into the person who just crashed. And afterwards, the Formula One driver who made it through without crashing was asked how he avoided the person in front of him. And he said, well, normally the crowd, when I go around this corner, are looking at me. And on this occasion, I could see their heads were all turned. So I knew something had happened. So he slowed down and navigated through it. And the point Dave was making, like he was against with Michael Schumacher when he saw a black cloud 45 degrees over there while going through a chicane, was that some of the athletes have this innate ability to just stay so relaxed that they are driving like they're driving at 30 miles an hour on a nice country road, as opposed to in a Formula One situation where it's life and death and they're desperately trying to win a Grand Prix. And I just wondered if that is an innate achievement. Is it something that Novak can just lock down and go straight into having that subconscious feeling, or is that a learned behavior?
It's probably a mixture of both, I would say. So I think there's definitely some genetic part to it. You know, it might be also, honestly, at a young age, how you were brought up from your parents. I think that can already play a big role if you have a good mentor at a young age, you know, that your mindset, it doesn't even go into another direction. You already have to realize you have to be kind of like, not in an arrogant way above everybody else, but you have to, you know, from a conscious point of view, you already have to be at a different level. So while others are still fighting, you know, for let's say the simple things and the simple movements, kind of like a bodyguard, you know, everybody's looking, let's say there's an explosion on the one side of the room, everybody's looking at the explosion, but you're the only person that's looking on the other side, you know, so you have to train yourself mentally to already, you know, to be there. But, and I think that's very important, you have to have certain specific levels of, for example, fitness, you know, other variables, you know, that we talked about quickly there, sleep, you know, you have to have such good routines that you are in such good shape to be able to do that as well, you know. So I think, I mean, at least I haven't met him, you know, Novak, but from what I hear, you know, he does all these kind of things to keep him at the top level. And for example, Mo Salah, it's not surprising that he's at such a high level, because he's doing everything right, literally every little percentage. And you can really see that it does make a difference. But amazing story, really cool. I haven't heard that one before. Yeah, amazing.
Mark?
No, that's I think you know, like I've said, I think when Niklas spoke with us in the webinar, he gives you a real detailed idea on how the process works. But I think it's a really interesting pathway and technology that people can use to help. I think, like I said before, I think we don't address this as coaches. We do a bad job of addressing this and trying to figure out solutions. We're a little bit, you know, sometimes you have to look outside the box in tennis coaching. Sometimes you have to be careful not to look outside the box, because the answer is inside the box where you already are. So you have to be smart with what you're doing. But I think it's a really, really interesting way for athletes to help improve their performance at all levels.
Niklas, going back to your website and the Liverpool work that you did, it was Mo Salah, as you said, and Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I'm desperately hoping is going to stay at Anfield. But they have all these contraptions with their heads and everything. Can you explain what exactly that is doing and what is it?
I mean, in the end, that's the EEG that I mentioned. So it's literally electrodes attached to your scalp. And that's literally like that just sends the signal down to an amplifier that sends the signal to a laptop, so I can see live, what's happening. But for the athletes, it's just too much information. So we use a sound to teach the athletes to get into the zone or to get into that mental state. So I have two roles basically. One role is to observe, and it was really cool, Mark, also in our session that we could stand together and, observe together. But the other part is then also to go in and ask the right questions and to train, and just to get that broad, good knowledge base. Yeah. But in the end, to be honest, Kenny, it looks fancy and all that. But I think the future will be, in my opinion, and that's what we are also working towards, is that everybody can do that like on his or her own. Because I mean, I'm wearing AirPods right now. I think back like 10, 20 years, everything was bigger. Yeah. And I really think that in the future, every athlete, every human is going to benefit from that. So I think we're at the forefront of that, and I'm really excited, because I think we have knowledge that other people don't have yet. So we know how to do it, kind of like, to approach it in the right way. And that's why, everybody's interested in us. Honestly, just follow us, because there's going to be, I think, many more exciting things ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Niklas, thanks so much for your time and helping us and giving some insights to people. I think people are going to find this really fascinating, and hopefully we can have you come back on and have some more tennis players experience Neuro 11.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot to you both.
I've got one more question before we stop. Yeah. And your Instagram, we've got the handle neuro11_official for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube. I would like to know, Niklas, 3 athletes that you personally admire for their mental strength. They could be past or present.
Well, Mohamed Salah is definitely one of them.
Okay, good choice.
Amazing.
And why? Obviously, you've spoken a little bit about him, how he has amazing goals and achieves, gets the sleep, gets the food he needs. His methods are very precise. Is there anything else in particular that you admire about Mo?
Discipline. Yeah. Discipline, I think, is the biggest one. And you ask anybody in that locker room, everybody's publicly open about it, They all want to have that level of discipline and high performance. And to be able to, just to realize, look, everything that I do has that one little percentage. So that's amazing. And then, of course, having to deal with, all the stuff around it. The whole world is, it's crazy these days. Everybody's judging you. Everybody's assessing you if you're such a world-class player. So to go through that and at that age perform, consistently every year is unbelievable. Like the numbers he's putting down this year are compared to, Messi's prime a couple of years ago. It's just crazy, and that in the Premier League. So
it's amazing.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So 1 down, mentally, 2 to go.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question. Is this any kind of sport, or is it?
Yeah, anything you want.
Surely it's got to be the guy in your background picture right there.
Zasha Barkov?
Yeah, Barkov's got to have a mention, surely. I mean,
I think the one guy, and as a German, growing up, I think that played a role was Dirk Nowitzki. Because for us, he put the NBA, on the map. Like before in Germany, nobody really watched NBA, and then you watch him play in the playoffs, back then with Dallas and winning everything and having the highest free throw percentage. So that already back then was very impressive to me. So I was lucky enough. During COVID, I couldn't do much, but the one thing I could do was meet with his former coach, Holger Geschwindner, who's famous because he's also a physicist. So I trained with him. I showed him our training also 2 or 3 times, and we trained together. And he explained like his approach to me, and the way that Dirk had to sing, or he was singing. I've been looking for freedom before every free throw. Kind of a famous story in Germany. Wow, so that's also, for example, a good routine, like I've been looking for, and then going for it. So, I mean, there's a reason why he had the best free throw percentage, and that is a very big player too, like tall.
Yeah.
It's also not very, very common. So
he's probably my number 2. That's fascinating.
Yeah. He's probably my number 2. And I think my number 3, difficult. Very, very difficult. I think I have to go back to football, and I have to go back a little bit further, I think. But Franz Beckenbauer, for me, is a big one. There's a big quote where he says basically, "Okay, now stop talking and just go out there and play football." It kind of summarizes everything very well in what we do. It's like you do everything, but in the end, guys, just enjoy too. You have to. If you lose the pleasure in what you're doing, if you lose that. That feeling, like I also said in the seminar, as a kid, of being just in the moment and being there because you really want to, and just let the noise shut up and just do whatever you want. I think that's amazing. And of course, he won the World Cup as a player, as a coach, and as an organizer or president. So it's like can't really go much higher than that as a German.
The Kaiser.
But yeah.
All right. So we've had two footballers, one NBA, two Germans, and one Egyptian. Dr. Niklas Häusler, thank you so much. Mark and I are so grateful for you coming on. It was absolutely fascinating. Mark, anything to add?
No, just thanks so much for coming. And I think it's a really interesting topic and a great technology. And I definitely advise everyone listening to try and learn more about it. Visit the website and contact Niklas if you can. Thanks
to you both. Really, really appreciate the invite. Have a good day. All the best in Rome and Candy. I don't know where you're at right now.
I am in London, and then I'll be commentating on Rome from Monday.
Cool. Awesome. So, all right.
Yeah. Thanks very
nice
much.
to meet
Have
you.
a lovely day, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll be back soon with another great episode.